You are a coach, but you need coaching. So don't neglect yourself. I always used to say this when I was running the system, our players will be as good as our worst coach. If you weren't on a journey to be better each and every day, I didn't want you in our system.
So welcome to the next episode of the Game Plan Coaching Podcast. And today's guest is Bobby Scales II. I first met Bobby on a UK coach development program a few years ago, and he shared a really strong message with the coaches. As an athlete, part of your plan A should be developing your plan B, thinking about tomorrow as part of today, and that's always stuck with me. Bobby is an inspiration and thinks really deeply about the people that he works with whilst he's coaching or whilst he was playing. Bobby was a Major League Baseball player and a senior leader, and he was involved in clubs such as the LA Angels, the Pittsburgh Pirates. He played in Japan, and now he's a Detroit Tigers broadcaster. Bobby really thinks about what helps athletes grow. And in our conversation, he digs into his own experiences playing multiple sports as a child and how that shaped his journey in and through sport, how it helped him develop toughness and footwork and decision making, and how being exposed to different sports and their cultures helped him develop in a range of different ways. The conversation, I think, is a brilliant lens on the early experiences we want children and young people to have in sport, not narrowing their world of participation too early and giving them the opportunities to play, sample and experience lots of different sports. In the conversation, Bobby opens up about the realities of coaching and leadership, self-care, strain on family life, and in his words, meeting every person where they are. He says during the conversation, you can't fool the locker room. How he wants to zoom in on the authenticity that coaches should bring. I love talking to Bobby, and I always leave every conversation with him with something new to think about. Bobby has had a long and winding journey, playing multiple sports, making a 31-year-old rookie debut as a Major League Baseball player. He's a leader in sport and now a Tigers broadcaster. Hope you enjoy the conversation with Bobby Scales II.
My name is Bobby Scales. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and then ultimately went through high school over here in the States and ended up in university. I went to the University of Michigan. Well, let me back up a little bit. I was a multi-sport athlete in life, really. I played everything every season. But when I got to high school, it was football, basketball, American football, not the real football, football, basketball, and baseball. And I'm a normal sized human. And when I graduated high school, I was 5'9", 5'10", about 165 pounds. So my basketball and football, American football dreams anyway, were crushed because I am not near big enough to star or play at a Division I level in those two sports. So baseball very quickly became my focus towards the end of my high school career. I was a good player, not a great player. So I was not a heavily recruited athlete, only some smaller schools. But in my house, academics were number one, no matter what we were doing. So my academics were very strong, and I was able to gain acceptance to the University of Michigan. And at that point, I wanted the opportunity to play. They weren't really actively recruiting me, but I wanted the opportunity to play. So I walked on and asked for a tryout. I was granted a tryout. Unfortunately, I worked my way into a starting position later in my first year there. And then from the rest of my career on there, was very successful. Was able to get drafted in the 14th round in 1999 by the San Diego Padres in the baseball draft. So we started our professional career, and that's where things got a little interesting, quite frankly. Normally, a guy gets to the big leagues. There's a pretty, I won't say rapid, but a quicker progression than I had. It took me 10 years to get to the major league team, or the first team equivalent. Imagine spending 10 years in the academy starting at 21. That's not exactly how a traditional path, but that's how it worked out for me. And I was able to get to the big leagues in 2009. For a brief period of time, I was kind of up and down between the big league team and the minor league team. And then same thing in 2010. And then I finished my career 2011, 2012 in Japan. And it's interesting too, because I knew from a very young age, I told my mom and my dad when I was 14 years old that I was going to be the GM of the Detroit Pistons, or I was going to be athletic director at a major university. So while I was a good athlete, I was very much preparing for my work life post playing career, whether that started at 22 or whether it started for me like it did at 35. You know what's coming as an athlete. And I wasn't going to be one of those athletes that made $100 million and rode off into the sunset and took his kids to school and played golf every day. That was never going to be my lot, and that was okay. And so when that day came in 2012, I was ready for it. I was ready to be done playing. Unfortunately, I'm divorced, but so my wife at the time and I made the decision that basically midway through 2012 was going to be my last season. So we needed to figure out what was going to be next for me. And at that time, spending as much time as I did in baseball, professional baseball, I knew that was probably the best avenue for me. And I really wanted to stay in it. It wasn't a situation where this is all I can do. This is all I know. So I feel trapped by this industry. So I ended up getting appointed director of player development for the Los Angeles Angels. So we picked up from Atlanta, Georgia, moved over to Los Angeles. I spent 4 years doing that. And unfortunately, as it is in pro sports, Tom, we've talked about this many times. You know, the saying over here is you haven't worked in baseball until you've gotten fired in baseball. So we got fired. My leadership group got fired at the end of 2015, but I had a year left on my contract. So the new GM, a guy named Billy Epler, a good dude, it didn't work out for him either. But Billy Epler came in and said, listen, I want to help you get better as a baseball professional. I need you to be a special assistant to me, and I want you to scout and do special projects for me. And so 2016, I did that. That was a very, very rigorous year. And with travel, I traveled. I was out of my house, away from home, 217 days. But I got better. And it was exhausting. It was taxing to the point where I got out of professional athletics. I got out of sport in total. I attempted to sell insurance for a year. That was not where I needed to be. That was not my lane. I was trying to be something I was not, which was a non-sportsman. That's who I am. Everything I do needs to be in and around it. That's where I thrive. And so we got back in 2018 with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I spent 5 seasons over there, and unfortunately got bit again by not winning enough games in the major leagues. So we got fired again. 22, I ended up getting the job as vice president of baseball for Sports Info Solutions. Sports Info Solutions at that time, they still are, but they mine a lot of the deep dive analytical data that many of these front offices in baseball use. So there's surface level data that you can see, batting average, home runs, RBIs, and then there's what we call advanced level data and more OPS plus, some of these more advanced metrics that are coming so into vogue now in Major League Baseball. So Sports Info Solutions mines that. So I was the vice president over the baseball vertical, and we had football, American football and basketball, but I was vice president over the baseball vertical. Mm-hmm. Did that for just over 2 years. And then interesting thing happened midway through my first year with SIS. The Detroit Tigers called and said, we would love to have you. We would like to talk to you anyway about being a pundit, a color analyst for our radio and television broadcast. And so that was interesting because I had done a little bit of that before, like very little, just guest appearances here and there. But then very quickly, I realized this is really cool. So my first year, I did 65 games. My second year, I did 88 games plus the playoffs. And last year, I did right at 100 games. Did the playoffs on radio. And then also I did 5 games on television. My first time on television. And then I did another 15 games, the pre and post game show. So the show that leads up to and then ultimately winds up the broadcast. So it's been a long and winding road. It's been awesome. I wouldn't change a thing. It hasn't been perfect, but that's okay.
Wow, what a journey. That is an incredible life cycle, I suppose, coming into sport, playing across different ones, and then the highs and lows of being coaching at the highest levels. Can we just rewind right back to the beginning where you said you were a multi-sport athlete?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about talent identification, talent development, and having that broad base of sports that you played in. Now, genetics obviously will play a part in how far you can go in some of those sports, but how valuable was it for you and your development that you didn't specialize too early?
Oh, it was massive. It was absolutely massive. And the truth of it is, I was a good athlete. My mother played softball when she was in high school here in the States. And then my dad was a 3-sport athlete. You know, he played American football and basketball and ran track. So that athletics was a part of our house. I mean, my mom wasn't a great athlete, but it was just a part of our house. And I genuinely played. I will say this: my father never pressured me one day to do anything. Mm. It was always just go have fun, and that's what we did. And you can ask my dad. It was funny because, like I said before we got on, we were talking. We were visiting my dad and I, and he says, I just wanted you to be able to be a decent athlete in high school. The college thing and the professional thing was never my goal for you. I just wanted you to be a guy that could go out with his friends and play and hold his own and be on the team in high school maybe. And if that's what you wanted to do, great. If not, that was fine too. But it was great because we would, you start in the summertime, right around July, the end of July, you would have American football camp because the season over here runs in the fall. And so you'd start training for that, and then you start playing games and football. I mean, you guys see it, and you guys know enough about NFL now. It's physical, even at the high school and the youth levels. I mean, you find out very quickly what you're made of. Either it's for you or it's not for you, because you're running full speed collisions into people, and you have to get up and do it again 15 seconds later. So you can't run from it. And that toughness, that edge, that grit, I think was really honed and forged there. And then basketball, truthfully, was my favorite sport of growing up. It's good feet. It's change of direction. It's the pressures of time and space. All of those things go into making a phenomenal athlete. And then, when I was playing baseball, I was a shortstop coming up. I played in the middle of the diamond. You're in the center of the action, outside the pitcher and the catcher. In the first baseman, you handle the ball more than anybody else. So the ability to change direction, the ability to make snap decisions. I think the good feet, that was the main place when I was playing baseball that I knew I had played a lot of basketball, because my feet always moved very quickly, very well, very cleanly. Here's the other thing, too. I think it's missed a little bit when you're talking about multi-sport athletes and not specializing. Each one of these sports has a different sport culture and a different sport ecosystem where the norms of the game are what they are, and they live there. And so you adapt as you play those sports. And then when you come out of one season and go into another, you got to get back into a different mode, because the sport cultures and that ecosystem are different. So the norms in football are different than the norms in basketball, are different than the norms in baseball. And so that was a huge piece of development for me too, just being able to switch and go back and forth between those over the various seasons. So that was a huge piece for me, is just being able to immerse myself, not just in the physical work, but also the sport culture and the social norms that go along with playing those games.
I think there's something really powerful in what you're saying there, that for you to better boil down just in this conversation, that from American football, there was that grit, that relentless being able to pick yourself up after you've been hit down, the speed of footwork, which comes from basketball, the quick decision-making that comes from baseball, and then, I suppose, being exposed to different cultures and environments through those sports, physically and psychologically, how that would light up different parts of the brain and teach you different things, about movement, but also about yourself, just from the environment you're putting yourself in. And when I reflect on that and step back about the experiences we want young people to have in sport, and then how that helps them in sport, but also in life, that's so strong, so powerful.
100%. I think it's directly transferable. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the quickness, the agility, you have to have your mind, and listen, even when you're coaching, even when you're doing, if you're trying to excel in corporate business or whatever that is, there's going to be times where you have to buckle down. You have to physically just decide that you're going to dominate the space, or, you've got a big presentation that's due and it's late and it's after hours, and, you've got friends that are going down to the pub or what have you. No, we've got to grind this out. We've got to finish this presentation. It has to be sharp. I have to be 100% tomorrow. So you have to exercise some discipline, right? These are all things that are transferable. That's the beautiful part about sport. That is the most beautiful thing about it. It's less about the final score and more about what's going to happen, how these things can transfer into the rest of your life. I think the important part is these things can be honed, and these lessons can be learned through, I won't say unintentionally, but almost a little bit by accident. If you play enough of them as growing up as a kid and you do well, you're going to learn these things and be part of the group and be part of that sport culture.
Yeah, totally. I was having a conversation recently with another podcast guest. His name's John, based in Australia, wonderful human being. And he was talking about the quality of relationships that coaches need to have with their athletes, and highlighted some skills, some qualities, if you like, that need to shine through. And he talked about trust, doing no harm, forgiveness, hope, and care being like central to the skills of any coach. And to add discipline to that collection of different things that come through sport, that aren't necessarily having to be taught explicitly, but that happens because of the environment and the edges of performance we find ourselves on. It is so transferable, and it does transcend.
No doubt about it. I mean, that's a wonderful collection. And I don't want to just call them a collection of words, but they have power. I'm a big, just in general in my life is that, mean what you say, do what you mean and mean what you say. Right. And so what I mean by that is these words have power, and I'm a big believer that words matter. And so when you have to be very careful when you're just throwing flippant things out there or cliches or catchphrases, but all of those things are vitally important when you're trying to develop and cultivate a relationship with an athlete in an effort to make them better on the field. One of the things that I'm a big believer in, Tom, and we've talked about this before too, is the player resides within the human. You want access to that player, you've got to know that person first. So what goes into building a relationship and knowing a person? It's trust. It's the ability to, like you said, do no harm. Does this person know that I am in it for the right reasons? Does this person trust that I'm going to do my level best, not just to do no harm, but to make them better in the end? And there may be some struggle, and there may be some push and pull involved in that, but at the end of the day, they believe that I am here to help. And if you can do that, man, that's powerful, and it transcends instruction. It's not just about making a guy have a better swing. It's not just about teaching a young lady to hit that in swinging ball from a corner better. It's about trying to make them a better human. And ultimately, if you try to make them a better human, you're definitely going to get access to make their skills in a given discipline better.
I want to jump back into your journey, Bobby. Mm-hmm. And there's something I'd love to pick up on, because you said that from a young age, you knew that you wanted to be an athletic director at high level franchise or club later on in your journey. And your words, not mine, but something that you said on a previous call that we had was, well, part of your plan A should be developing your plan B. That's stuck with me all the way through. Yeah. And I'd love to just pick into that a little, just to get a sense of how that's played out for you in your experiences and how you've helped other athletes bring that front and center.
Now, for me, and that's the thing. And again, that starts at home. Academics are number one in my house. If you didn't perform properly in school, you can forget baseball, basketball, football. I did play a couple seasons. Unfortunately, it didn't take. I wish it did. I came to loving football later in life, but that didn't take it initially. But more to the point, that came from home. Like this is not a game. If you can unlock your education and do well in your education, it will provide a gateway for you the rest of your life. You can completely change your life by having a proper education and good work ethic. So that was my mom and dad from the very beginning, especially my mother. She did not go to university, but my dad did. My dad started university, went to Vietnam, came back, fortunately, and then finished university when he got back. So education was always a big deal in our house. And so that was always plan A. Yeah. It's always plan A.
Yeah. Yeah.
This sporting thing was something that, okay, you're good at it. Let's keep on with this thing as long as you can. So I was always working plan B or plan A while playing plan B. That was always the case, right?
So
So the plan B, you are actively working plan A while you're playing plan B. That's the key. And so just being prepared for the end. And Tom, you've seen this a lot, and I've seen it a lot in my travels and work as well. Guys have a really difficult time at the end if they don't know, they don't have a plan what they're doing, right? We've seen the depression. We've seen the abuse of controlled substances. We've seen the abuse of alcohol because guys get depressed because their entire identity is wrapped up in the games that they played. And these are people guys who made a lot of money and guys who didn't, or guys and gals who make a lot of money and guys and gals who made no money. Because they get wrapped up in that athletic identity, whereas it's only a piece of who you are. It's only a small piece of who you are as a human. But the biggest thing I can say is, if you're a young coach, if you're a parent of a young kid that shows some promise athletically, you have to make sure that while this is a big piece for them, this is not all of who they are. And everybody doesn't have to be tremendous students. There's other things, there's other pathways, but you need to be putting some type of plan into place long before the end so that their identity isn't wrapped up in just their sporting endeavor. And that can avoid a lot of heartache and a lot of pain on the backside.
I've seen this in some of the environments I've worked, some more than others, where as the athlete moves through the journey and the commitment rises, more and more stuff just gets trimmed away from the rest of their life, whether that's education, whether it's other sports and activities, whether it's social groups. And it's almost, I've heard it framed as like this opportunity cost. You might be in this system, but what's the cost of being here on the rest of your life? And then what comes beyond your athletic experience? And the way you put it there, I wrote down in front of me, it feels like this ethical dilemma between doing more doesn't necessarily mean getting better. It's the intentionality of training and focus and being able to think about more than just today.
I agree. Again, agree 100%. I mean, look, even as a kid, like even when I played, we were, I'm an only child, so it was just me. So it was my mom and my dad and myself. And so they always tried to make sure that I had different experiences. We did well. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm coming from a tough situation. We did well. My dad had a very good job. My mother worked as well. We did well. So I wasn't like I was deprived of anything, and I didn't have access to those different experiences. But again, we weren't world travelers or anything like that, but we did have different experiences that allowed me to turn off a bit from the various sports I was playing. Occasionally, I was busy. I had 3 sports, but there were some times where we did some different things, and some times where athletics wasn't the focus at all in any way, shape, or form, right? And so I think that's vitally important to provide your kids, provide your students, provide your athletes with as many opportunities off the pitch, off the court, out of the playing arena that you possibly can to round them into these good humans, and also expose them to different things. And this is just exposure. You may have a group of kids you take to do something, and they're like, "This, hey, coach, this is not very fun. This is not it." That's okay. There's going to be some misses in there too, but allowing them to see different opportunities that are in front of them, I think you're going to get a better athlete. You're going to get a more well-rounded athlete. You should not be thinking about a given sport 24 hours a day. If you're going to sleep for 8 of them, which we recommend, we know sleep is the magic pill now. That gives you another 16 hours to be productive in another arena. And so there's time in the day. The question is, how are you going to use it? Are you going to use it to your benefit both now and later, or are you going to go to training, leave training, and then jump on the PlayStation? Yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah. I want to switch just to one final part of your journey for now. I think it was when you said you were director of player development at the Angels, and you said you were away from home for 217 days. That's an extraordinary amount of time. So one of the things I notice when I'm working with coaches is a lack of self-care. A lot of the coaches I work with are rather centered, and they're thinking about the people they're supporting before themselves. And sometimes that passion overplayed can have a detrimental impact on other parts of coaches' lives. And I'm just curious, like how did you survive being away from home so often? And is there anything you've learned from that experience that perhaps would help others?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, Tom, you've been in it. We've hundreds of colleagues on both sides of this conversation that we know have been in it. It's difficult. I think that, that year was extremely difficult. So if you look at the jobs I did inside the game, now mind you, 2017, I was not inside of baseball. But from 2013, the end of 2012 to my exit in 2011, I was out an average of 176 days a year, with that 217 being the high in 2016. You have to have, if you're married, you have to have the right spouse. It's the only way it works. And I'm divorced. I that wasn't the sole reason, but I'd be foolish to think that wasn't part of the cause, right? And these days, when you're in that level of upper management, when I'm in the decision-making circle, you are neck deep in it 250 days, 260 days a year. The season over here in the States for baseball is 162 games. And so you've got the spring training that's about 50 days on top of that. And then you've got where I was the director of player development for our academy. So that means at the end of the season, you have this thing called Instructional League, where all of your prospects come down to your spring training facility and they do more training at the end of the season. So, I mean, you're switched on. I mean, when I say switched on, you are neck deep in baseball, everything for 250, 260 days, right? And so it's a lot. And your spouse has to understand, this is what I do. I'm going to be gone a lot. You're going to have to, bring, during my very first year doing that, my son was born. My son's 12 now. So you're going to have to bring him to the office. You may have to bring him to the training facility, because if you don't, I don't know, how much I'm going to see you guys. I will say this, the industry has wised up since then. It's never going to be work-life balance because it's just not, but it's better. It's a better work-life balance than it was in the era I came up in the era that I was a player in, and then obviously the era that I was an executive in. It's difficult. It has to be a very open and honest communication. I think you have to be very upfront with your spouse, with your partner from the very beginning. Listen, this is the path I'm choosing. I'm going down this road. The train's leaving the station. If it's not for you, I accept that. I had that conversation with my former wife, and again, we had other issues surrounding communication, and unfortunately it didn't work out. But, and I'll say this, I am engaged to a wonderful woman now. She's a physician over here in the States. I told her the very first time we sat at dinner on our first date, I said, listen, this is what I do. We got to communicate. We got to work through it. Who knows where this relationship is going to go. And she says, well, we'll work with it. We'll see where we are. And she's been there for the last 4 years. We're getting married in a few months here. And this time around, a little maturity, a little more communication, we will be better. This will be where I need to be for sure. But it's difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah. But look, thank you for being really open, because I'm sure there's lots of coaches listening to this who probably have experienced or are experiencing very, very similar things, and acknowledging that it's really difficult and it's never a balance between work and life. We talked about identity briefly already, but it's part of who you are is being a coach. And so many coaches give their full self into the role, and other things are fraying on the edges. So recognizing that it's not necessarily perfect, but doing what you can to manage and have those loving relationships around you is so important. And I hear so many coaches who, they give so much, and it's really hard to dial it down or switch off or change lanes sometimes. But I think there's something quite comforting in the fact to recognize you're not alone. There's many coaches out there who are experiencing similar things, but acknowledging that it's a challenge is really important.
No, so Tom, let me tell you a story. This is, and I know we're running on time here, but this is, I think, is a very poignant message, and this illustrates your point. So, one of my favorite coaches that I had was a gentleman named Ace Adams, Arthur Ace Adams. He was an old left-handed pitcher, pitched at the University of Michigan, went directly into coaching when he was done, and he was well into his coaching career. He was a pitching coach at Michigan, and he gave me an opportunity. He was a recruiting coordinator, so he was responsible for bringing all the talent into the university at the time. So he brings my entire group in. He gives me the opportunity to walk on. I just showed up in his office and asked for an opportunity, and for whatever reason, he gave it to me, right? But he had a young daughter when we were in school, okay? And she would come to practice, and she'd bop around and, do the things. It was cute, seeing some of our coaches' kids, and now they're grown. I mean, I'm 48 years old. So I'm 30 years removed, or, just about 30 years removed from college, right? So fast forward a number of years later, I finally see her again as an adult. And she's out, and she's gotten a degree, and she's out in the working world. And it was a chance encounter. She's like, hey, do you remember Ace Adams? I was like, of course. That's my dad. I was like, I was blown away, Abby, I'm like, God, I haven't seen you in years, whatever. And so I immediately got emotional. And I got emotional because player, you go on, you play professionally, you get into the other side of it, you realize how hard it is for a coach. You realize how much you're gone from your own family. You realize how much the travel, the recruiting, the decision-making, the late nights, making roster moves and roster decisions, the hard decisions of moving on from staff, changing someone's life when you decide to, move on from them as a staff member. She lived all of that on the backside of it being a coach's daughter because he was gone a lot, right? And I got emotional. I just said, I couldn't even get anything else out. I just said, thank you for sharing your father with us. The thousands of guys he coached over the course of his career. And Ace is still doing some stuff. He's a little bit older now, but he's still doing some work in a different, and he's not with a team anymore. He's doing some private instruction, but all I could do was, I was really emotional. I was choked up, and I was like, Abby, thank you for sharing your dad with us. And I've made that a point. All of my coaches, if I see their kids and they're grown now or what have you, I tell them, thank you for sharing your father with us and allowing your father to make a whole bunch of guys, including myself, better humans and better players, because it's a big deal, man. You're gone a lot. And if you are a coach, you're an executive, you're working in professional athletics, or you're working in athletics, period, be cognizant of that. Put it down. Go home. Don't sleep in the office. Don't do stuff like that. Go home. Figure out, be very strategic and very aggressive with finding days. Okay, I'm going to work from the house here. I don't need to go to the facility. We don't have anything going. Or I'm going to knock off early. You know, maybe there's a dead period in your schedule depending on what's going on. Get home. Find a way to schedule around your children's games, or find a way to schedule around your children's events, and it's going to cost, you know, I know we talk about recovery and sleep and self-care. It's going to cost you a little of that. Make sure you stay on top of that too, as best you can, but figure out a way to get home, figure out a way to be with your spouse, figure out a way to get to your kids' activities, because it's important. You don't get them back.
Bobby, in every episode of the podcast, we ask our guests to contribute something into what we're calling the game plan. So it's a shared book of stories and ideas and lessons that coaches can draw on. And every guest so far has added something completely unique. So, drum roll please, big moment. What is it, Bobby, that you'd like to add to our coaching game plan?
Number one, I think there's a couple things. There's one, I'll go with be authentic. Okay. You have to be who you are as a human. And you have to stay true to who you are as a coach, okay? Because there's a saying in baseball, you can put it in any context, whether it be the locker room, the change room, the clubhouse. You cannot fool the clubhouse. You cannot fool the change room. You will not fool the locker room. They know. So the second you try to be fake, the second you try to be inauthentic with who you are or what you teach or what you believe in, you will be found out. And when you get found out like that, that's when you lose locker rooms. That's when you lose change rooms. That's when you lose clubhouses. So you got to be yourself. The second thing I will say, and this is the thing that was the most difficult for me to come to so you have to remember, I went right from playing. September 26, 2012, I was a player for the Oric Buffalo in Osaka, Japan. That was my final game as a professional baseball player, as a professional athlete. November 7th, I was named director of player development. I went from worrying about one person, me, to 260 people, 200 players, 60 staff members. Okay. I had to manage up to my assistant GM, my general manager, and then ultimately my owner, and manage down all the way to the guy who was tending to the facilities and all the complexes where our affiliates were. Right. So you have a wide breadth of people you have to be either accountable to or responsible for. Okay. But what I'm getting at is you have to meet each and every person where they are. It may not come across on this podcast, but I'm a very intense human. I was the guy that would just grind and grind. I was the guy that made it a nightmare for you to play against me, but you want me on your team. And there were times when I first got into that chair as a director and I would see a young man play or I'd see a young man work out and I could not understand. Felt everything that didn't meet my standard of grind and grit and determination and go get it, I felt was lazy. And what I had to understand is that people tick in many, many, many different ways. There might be a guy who looks like he's not really going hard for it or getting after it, that there's an internal fire that burns hotter than mine even. And I had to figure out how to access that player, access that human. There might be a guy who was just like me who, because he was just like me, I had to remove that and I had to really examine the skills. I'm like, I love this guy's mentality. I love this guy's grit and determination. And I love how he shows it outwardly because that's how I did it. But he can't play. He's not good enough. We got to move on. So really, really understanding each and every player, staff member, how they learn, how they think, how they move throughout their day, gives you insight to how they're going to be as a coach, player, trainer, strength and conditioning. That's who they are. How do they process information? How do they learn? How do they make decisions? These are all there's tools for things like this that help you, but understand getting a handle on how each one of the people that you surround yourself with tick and how it relates to you. And the final thing I will say is whatever you do, my grandfather used to say, hey, son, that's really smart, but put that where the goats can get it. Don't get full of yourself. Don't use all these cute little industry terms. Don't use all of these corporate terms. Use plain English and put stuff where people can understand it and have understanding early on in their journey to either acquire the skill or correct something. Just put it where the goats can get it, make it simple. And then that way, everybody's on the same page.
I don't know what to say. They're fantastic. Be authentic, make every person where they are, and put it where the goats can get it. I'll remember that saying forever because I've never heard that before.
No, yeah, it's actually a pretty common saying here in the States, but yeah, it's Tom, it's simple. It's just like, listen, we have high level industry things, industry terms. And that honestly, that's the biggest thing. I remember when I first started my journey into broadcasting, right? There's some very high level things that you can say on air that make you sound really smart. But what you're doing, you got to remember. And a guy told me, he goes, remember, there's a 10-year-old on the couch watching with his dad. His dad's an accountant. There's a 10-year-old baseball player on the couch. You got to say things that they can understand. And so that's, every time I think about that, I think about my grandfather. He's like, son, you got to put that where the goats can get it, son. And so that's what he would say. It's true. So don't overcomplicate things. Be simple in your messages.
Yeah. And don't try to be too clever, I guess.
That's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah. You mentioned, and look, I'm conscious of our time together now, but meeting every person where they are. I buy into that hugely. And it's taken me a little while, actually, in my experiences of coaching and helping coaches to become better at doing that, to be better at listening well and adapting my approach to suit those around me. If there was anything in that would be a tangible takeaway for a coach, where would you begin if that phrase is new to somebody listening to this? What's a good starting point for that?
Looking in the mirror.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is looking in the mirror. Okay, who were you? If you're a coach, you're a young coach. You're just starting in your journey. Whether you're you played at the university level, whether you played at academy level and got released, or whether you played 5 seasons in the Premier League. Look in the mirror. Okay, early on as a player, what did I respond to? As I grew as a human, literally as I got older and I got more experience and I moved to the first team, or I moved to, maybe whether it be the championship or with League One, whatever your top level is, as you move through your career, what did I respond to as a human? Then ask yourself why. It's going to be rooted in your personality and how you are and who you are. Again, the player resides within the human, not the other way around. That player is a direct reflection of who you are as a human. Right? So what things do you respond to? Now, go back through your playing journey. You had a teammate that was the polar opposite, that was a very effective player and a good human, and someone you may have liked, or someone you may not have liked. But guess what? When you're a coach, you got to figure out a way to reach all of them. Right? And so I think looking inward and then looking at some people you either admired or either didn't like, and they were good players or not good players, but look around you in your change room. There's personalities all in the change room. There's the crazy one that just does that they do stuff and then they figure out how to exit it later. There's the analytical person that's like, okay, we're going to attack this problem this way. There's all variations of players in your change room as a player. And as a player, you were just focused on the one that you saw in the mirror. But now you got to look outward. So start in the mirror and then look outward. Now, what you have to do at that point is figure out, okay, how did that person get reached? When they were at their best, how were they reached? Was it the pat on the back? Was it the stare down the touchline? Was it having to send them a WhatsApp message later saying, listen, we got to clean some things up here or there. It's all about understanding who you are as a human, and then understanding some of the archetypes of humans that you dealt with when you were as a player, because you're going to get them all as a coach, as an administrator, as a physio, as a strength and conditioning professional. You're going to get all of them. You don't have to be expert in all of them, but you got to figure out, you have to be pretty good at most of them to have an effective team, because you're going to have all types.
This conversation and all the conversations I've had on this podcast haven't been about X's and O's, technique and tactics. It's been about relationships and people. And for me, you've just completely brought to the surface the skill and the beauty and the messiness of coaching, because everyone's different. We spend so much time working in the grey. And I think that's a lovely way to frame it for coaches. Look in the mirror. What did you respond to? And what did you and the people around you respond to when they were at their best? What a brilliant message. So simply put as well.
That's it. And listen, and again, the ironic part is I'm out of it now. You know, I still do some mentoring. I still do some coaching of people. I'm not in the day-to-day of coaching baseball anymore, right? But even stepping back and doing what I'm doing now as a pundit, as a color commentator, it has allowed me to see a much more clearer picture. I'm not ruling out a return to those circles, but the way my life is set up now, I've got a 12-year-old son. I'm getting ready to get married again. She's got a 12-year-old daughter. So we have two preteens. It's a very interesting time in our life. I don't see myself necessarily going back to that, but it has allowed me a lot of clarity in that regard. It's been wonderful, actually.
We'll get into the final part of our conversation, which is some game-changing advice. And I'm always really keen that this podcast and these conversations feel tangible and actionable for the people who are listening. We can help them join the dots to an extent. So is there anything that maybe you'd like to share that coaches could apply, maybe adapt and edit for their environment, or just reflect on that you think would be really valuable and helpful?
You are a coach, but you need coaching, right? Like, so don't neglect yourself, what you are doing as a coach and as a professional. I always used to say this when I was running the system, right? Our players will be as good as our worst coach. So if you are not on a journey to improve yourself each and every day, I'll be very frank and direct here. If you weren't on a journey to be better each and every day, I didn't want you in our system, because you have to figure out a way to get better, because you're going to have new players that come in with new bits of technology they had from their previous stops, or you have to figure out better ways to reach their players. I used to recommend, if you're a coach and you've never sold something, I would recommend sales books, because you're selling ideas. You're selling, there's going to be a time where your player may be enjoying some success, but there's a fatal flaw in what they're doing. The body moves this way or the body moves that way. And you've got to convince them to take a step back, to take 2 or 3 forward. You've got to sell that idea. You may have an idea. You may be an executive and you may want to pitch something upstairs to your higher ups, but you need an extra $1 million to do it. You've got to put together a proposal and sell them on why it's going to help us develop players, right? So it's the constant quest of getting better. Whatever your area of weakness is, don't run from it, run right to it and find a way to make yourself better each and every day.
I love the idea that the art of selling, and as a coach, you're selling ideas, because you absolutely are. You're trying to get people to do things that they're not necessarily comfortable with or not thought about before. And look, within my role, coach developing, supporting other coaches, I'm a huge advocate that coaches need help and support. And there might be many barriers that get in the way of that. Perhaps the culture, becoming qualified many years ago, and then, well, you're qualified, you're one and done. Why do you need to engage in learning again? But I think if coaches like it or not, there's learning everywhere. There's feedback everywhere in everything that you do. You've just got to be able to open your eyes to it and be open to receiving some of that information, because your learning and the learning of the players that you're coaching are just intertwined. And you've got to be able to adapt and move with that group. Otherwise, you're not giving them the best possible experience that you can.
Right. And that's it. And we know, not even experience, but just look at the records. Yeah, all these great teams have great players. That's number one. You're not going to win anything if you don't have good players, right? But I think some of the most rich experiences I've ever had have been with teams that haven't been good record-wise, but it gave us the freedom to try a lot of things that we wanted to try, because we didn't necessarily have a bunch of prospects that were expected to move through to the first team. And that gave coaches freedom, and it gave coaches freedom to learn, to grow, and to, for lack of a better term, to experiment with some different methods that they may not have if they had players they really, really thought were going to move through to the first team. And then once you get that information, you're like, that worked beautifully. I'm going to put this on a player we really like. Or no, we're going to put that on the shelf, never to be seen again. But you don't know unless you explore, unless you do. And you don't know that unless you go out and seek information, new methods, new ways of reaching players that you didn't have before. Listen, the coach resides within the human too. And we got to keep growing as humans. Coaches are just all old players. Yeah. So if the player resides within the human, the coach resides within the human, right? So the premise doesn't change.
Yeah. From my point of view, and this is maybe how my mindset and approach has evolved over the years, it's not treating coaches as just like people to fill up with knowledge. It's exposing them to different ideas and helping them make sense of what's going to work in your environment. Because that, I think, is then where it's representative and it's real and it's applied rather than theoretical, and loads of it just gets lost lost in translation because it doesn't fit their context. So moving from empty cup to be filled up to here's some ideas. What does it mean to you and your coaching?
Right. And listen, and for me, when I was on the side of hiring and evaluating coaches, I wanted people that self-started in that manner and that understood that. I needed people because we were trying to move the needle. We were trying to push it. And you can't do that with coaches that are stagnant in their growth, in their acquisition of knowledge.
Bobby, thank you so much for the conversation. Time flies when you're having fun, and I can't believe we've been talking for so long. I'm just going to recap some of the headlines that's come out for me, and I'm going to start where we finished and work my way backwards. Some sound bites, if you like. But you are a coach, but you need coaching. I want to let that settle with the audience listening. The 3 things you put into our game plan: be authentic, meet every person where they are, and puts that where the goats can get it. I love that phrase. I can't believe I've never heard it before. And I know these are only sound bites, but there's an ocean of insight and thinking sat behind each of these. And then earlier in the conversation, we talked about self-care, being on the road so much and making sure you get the balance right if you can. The benefits of young athletes not specializing early and playing a diverse range of sports, and all those skills that transcend sports that you learn in the games that we play, but then follow us through life. And then that point around, in your household, academics being number one and then sport being the secondary, but always thinking ahead about not necessarily what you always need today, but what are you going to need for the future, and having that as part of your plan, either for the athletes that you coach or for yourself in your coaching journey.
No, that's it. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge that I've been able to acquire. None of it's mine. These are things that I've acquired. You add your bits to it, right? But, over the course of having wonderful parents and wonderful instructors, some not so good instructors, there's learnings there too, right? You learn all these things, and I've been fortunate enough to have these experiences and lead me to where I am now, and I look forward to growing and having some more.
Bobby, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Game Plan Coaching Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please follow the show and share it with a coach who might find it useful. I'd love to hear your feedback and any ideas you have for future guests. You can get in touch through the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and go well in your next coaching session.